A beloved 8-bit returns on FPGA again. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Next up, round 3.
Are preloaded retro consoles legit?
Mark Twain, the missing Apple computer. All this and more on this week's episode for the week of Saturday, the 26th of July, 2025.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, Twirlers. My name's Dave. With me today are the usual co-hosts, Jason.
That's me.
And Chris.
That's him.
That's him.
That's me.
This week, I didn't get knocked out in the first round of the Street Fighter 2 tournament.
Shut
Chris,
up.
how did you do?
Shut up. I don't want to talk about anything I did retro-related this week.
Do
you know what? I kept saying to people, I had so many friends saying, I'm not going to go because I'm no good. I kept saying, it doesn't matter. I'm no good. I'm just going for the fun. And I can now say it's no fun getting knocked out in the first round, which is what happened. But anyway.
No consolation bracket, just straight up, single elimination and you're wiping the bar?
It was not close at all. So, yeah, it was just basically one round. So, the normal best out of 3 bouts. And, there were so many players there that were clearly at a very high level. And I was not one of them. So the first bout was a flawless victory, even though that's a Mortal Kombat thing, for the opponent. And I'm like, what the heck? I did not even get a single hit in. I don't know how that happened. Second round was actually quite close, but I think he was backing off. And then I just made some stupid mistake at the end, and he didn't, clearly. And that's how I lost. And then just when I was thinking, okay, I'm back, and then I realized, well, that's it. That's it for the whole competition. So I driven down there, paid for 2 hours of parking, and played for about 1 minute, 30 seconds. But it was good fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is good fun. Yeah, fantastic place. I just go for the pizza and the beer.
I have finished my new computer and everything is up and running and hopefully no more recording problems. Listeners and viewers won't know about it, but the past couple of months there's been crashes and all sorts of problems, and I've replaced everything. Absolutely everything has been replaced, so it'll never happen again. It can't. Jason, have you had a busy week?
I have had a busy week of retro theater, just having a few days off from the Comedy of Errors. If you're in the southern Wisconsin area, come see us. You can still catch us Saturday and Sunday, 5 p.m. shows. You can find all about that if you look at that. Maybe we'll throw up a photo of me in action here.
I think we should get right into it because we have another packed show this week. Things keep happening.
Let's do it.
I love talking about things that succeed. Success is great. It's fun. It's enjoyable. And sometimes we cover stuff that isn't ideal on the show, but not today. You wouldn't have thought we'd get 2 sort of new, but not quite new, but mostly new 8-bit micros in the space of a week. It's not 1985 anymore when they were landing every week, but apparently they are landing every week now. Last week we had the Commodore 64 Ultimate, and this week it's the ZX Spectrum Next SU3. It is impossible to ignore the parallels. They obviously weren't aiming to launch at the same time. They're completely independent projects, but they have. They're both FPGA projects and both come complete in a new injection molded case with a decent keyboard. Both are more capable than the 8-bit originals that they imitate. Both integrate significantly important upgrades, like digital output for modern displays, flash storage so you don't need old discs and tapes, easy modern power supplies, and acceleration. And, as you may have gathered, or let's be honest, you probably already know, the Spectrum Next has been kickstarted before. Both times the Kickstarter have been a staggering success. All 3 issues have had the same target, £250,000, which is around 335,000 American dollars. The first hit 723,390 in 2017, so a rip-roaring success. The second managed 1,847,106 in 2020, although the global event rocked the boat on delivery of that one and they got through the problems. And SU3 Kickstarter, even though it's only been out for a couple of days, is on fire. They beat the first Kickstarter in 3 hours, and the first day of the second Kickstarter in 5 hours. So it's clear this is going to be the biggest one yet. It's not far off the total from issue 2 already, and it's only a couple of days in. So it looks like this is going to be by far the biggest issue of the Spectrum Next. There's already 10,000 Next out there in the wild, and this will likely double that. And that's not including the third-party Next that people make, because you can make your own Next. You don't have to go for this project for it. My mild criticism of the Next in the past has been that it didn't quite set the heather on fire with the development of new games and so on. But with double the amount of Next out there, I think this has a hope of changing. I also think the last time around with events entirely outside of their control, people backed it and it then took a lot longer to get it. It took a bit of the excitement away from it. So that won't happen this time, I'm sure. Fundamentally, though, I think the main purpose of these FPGA recreations is to make an absolutely perfect replacement for the originals, and they do that exceptionally well. So thank you to Starquake64 to submitting this to the subreddit. This time around, there are some enhancements. It now, well, I was going to say it now has a disk interface, and I'd be lying if I said that, because I've found out that I'm misunderstanding it. The Spectrum issue 1 and 2, you could not connect a disk interface because some signals didn't get to the user port, the expansion port. However, the signals now do get there, so you can now connect a disk interface to it, which is a big thing for me, because that's why I'm now going to back the SU3, because I really like using disks, and I'll be able to use 3-inch disks on my Spectrum, and that really matters to me. Call me weird if you like, but I absolutely love using them. The FPGA chip in it is larger. This means that potentially bigger third-party cores could be used. What that means is your Spectrum Nits could do some moonlighting as a different computer. I've always wondered why they don't put arcade cores on these things, because that's where I think they would excel. There's loads of arcade games with a single button that you could put on. It'd be great for that. It'll, of course, still have the Next keyboard, though, so depending on what you're doing, that could be irrelevant, it could be a minor inconvenience, or it could be terrible. There is now a translucent magenta option. If that's your buy, you can get a nice translucent Spectrum Next, and it does actually look pretty good. Maybe people will put some LEDs like the Solus project for the Amiga. You can have Knight Rider LEDs running across the top of your Spectrum Next. The main thing, though, is an extension to be more than just a Spectrum. It can do all of the Spectrums, but it can now also be a Sinclair QL. This was Sir Clive's attempt to go business. Didn't go well for Sir Clive in the competition from Amstrad on the low-cost side and PCs on the expensive side. There are some stretch goals, 6 games, the last of which is a space opera inspired by Elite, which really does take my fancy. But it's not just the official QL core it's getting an official C64 core. That's right, your Spectrum Next can be a C64, and at the time of writing, to the best of my knowledge, only one of the 2 projects we've talked about delivering a C64 and FPGA has officially licensed the C64 ROMs. Want to guess which one it is, Jason? Go on, take a guess.
It appears to be the Spectrum one, which is pretty wild. Yeah. It is nice and cool that they're shipping this is going to work out of the box C64 core with this, no fiddling around with ROM files. I did, at Dave's request, take a look at the feature list that they put out on Kickstarter about the 64 core. So I want to point out a few places, because this is being held up by some people as like, oh, well, for about the same amount of money, can I get a Spectrum plus 64 versus just buying the 64? So I do want to run through where the 64 on Next experience, based on their feature list, might fall a little short of expectations as more than a curiosity. For starters, and Dave kind of teed this up, the Next keyboard layout is really not convenient to map to a 64 mindset. They do promise that they will fully support all of the 64's keys with key combos. I'm sure that will be fine if you have a Post-it note on it or memorize it, but it will definitely take some getting used to. If you take a look, all of the Next modifier keys and punctuation are shifted to the left side of the keyboard. They're a little more evenly distributed on a 64 keyboard. They do support an external PS2 keyboard, which I'll mention a little bit later, which might give you some more flexibility to avoid key combos to do things like pressing a Commodore 64 function key. The Ultimate project, 64 Ultimate, does have USB ports that the Next lacks, which does give you a much wider range of newer keyboards to choose from, along with other quality of life improvements. There are a couple of other areas where the features that they list look a little questionable. Under the storage line, they say will support 8K and 16K cartridges, which definitely encompasses everything from kind of the 1982 to 87 period. But if that really is the sum total, that's a bit unfortunate because a lot of the interesting work that's going on nowadays is in large format, what we call easy flash cartridge images up to 1 megabyte. And those are used to distribute interesting large new games, larger game collections, things like the Prince of Persia port and so forth. Missing out on those is a bit of a shame. It does say that the common D64 disk image format is supported, but they're not promising true drive emulation, which could mean that fast loaders that you would find both in copy protection and in, like, this is a pirated collection of games, we're throwing a fast loader on them, that could mean they won't work as expected. I did dig through the Kickstarter comments trying to find if they'd addressed and answered this. I couldn't find it. There are hundreds of comments piling up there, so it's possible this has been addressed as we've gone to video, but I'm not sure. I do expect that it'll at least be asked and answered at some point soon. Gideon's Ultimate FPGA, as used in the new Commodore 64 Ultimate, does have support for those large cartridge images. It does have multiple true floppy emulation, has other convenience features. I think that what's described in the Next core could be good, but it also may need a few refinements to catch up with, say, what a software Commodore 64 emulator would deliver you 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone reasonably is going to buy this and say, well, I really want a Commodore 64, so I'm going to buy a Spectrum Next. I don't think anyone's going to say that. I don't think anyone is truly 50, well, many people are truly 50-50 on the fence. But if you do buy a Spectrum Next and you do get FPGA emulation of a Commodore 64, then it's a nice bonus to add. Something else they're going to do is the elusive SAM Coupe, one of the rarest micros around. It was a Spectrum successor, a Spectrum compatible successor that launched. It had its active fan base, but it wasn't particularly large. There's very few of them around, and they're very expensive. And it's a stretch goal which has already been met. So it will now have the QL, all the Spectrums, the Commodore 64, and the SAM Coupe. There are also secret stretch goals. So I asked one of the team, Mike Daly, for the lowdown on what the secret stretch goals were, and he wouldn't tell me anything. So if you're listening, Mike, you're a thanks for nothing. A few weeks ago, though, Chris, you were talking about missing out on the Issue 2 Spectrum Next and regretting it. So I assume you backed this.
Oh, dear. Do you know what? I put did the thing so it notified me as soon as it went live, and I looked at it when it went live, and I am so tempted. The situation I'm at now, if I hadn't just bought the MacBook Air like a few weeks ago, right? These things come at the worst time. And it's not that I don't have the money, but I do have somebody I have to be accountable to. just to put it that way, I have to have quite a good justification for this kind of spend. And look, I'm not saying I think it's a very reasonable price for what you're getting. I think it's actually amazing. But where I'm at is I am really, really tempted. I'm currently sitting back, and I know I've only got a finite amount of time to make a decision, but I'm trying to rationalize, what do I need this for? What do I want it for? Is this something I want to buy, or am I happy with what I've got, or do I just want the Spectrum from Retro Games Limited, which I know is nothing on par with this, but for my kind of retro gaming and just having a backup device for if one of my legit pieces of kit fails, then maybe that's better for my use case. But yeah, I might buy it, Dave, but I might need a divorce lawyer if I do. I'm not sure yet.
I think this would have to be your kind of daily driver, Spectrum. I think this would have to be the one you intended to replace the Spectrum on your desk with and say, this is the Spectrum I'm going to use. And I think otherwise, you have to have a lot of money kicking about as a spare. What really sold it for me, though, was the possibility of connecting a disk interface, which I'll need to investigate and create myself, perhaps. Maybe get it from PCBWay. I'll need to create that, but it's the thing for me is I must use original discs on my 8-bit machines. I really enjoy doing that. I'm a little bit funny that way, and the Spectrum SU2 and 1 can't do that at all. So this can do it, and that's why I backed it. So if you want to back it, the link is in the show notes, or just type into Google Spectrum Next Kickstarter Issue 3. It's on for the next probably 3 weeks, I think, after this broadcast, so you have time to decide. but the 3 weeks does rush past. They say this is the last one. They said the last one was the last one as well, though. I don't know. I don't know. It's a great project, though, and I think for what you get for the money, it's great, and they are trustworthy. They've done it before, so I'm all on board. I'm really excited at what they're going to deliver here, and I wish them the absolute best. It's a fantastic project. We are sponsored this week by Pixel Addict Magazine. Pixel Addict Magazine is the best Pixel Addict magazine around. What issue are we on now? I'm a little bit out of sorts. I haven't got the bookmark up because I'm on my new computer.
We're still on Addict issue 29, which has the all those tapes on the cover.
Oh, the tapes to load into your Spectrum Next. Because the Spectrum Next does have a tape interface on it, and now a disc interface as well. Paul reconnects with his Atari ST roots in this one. The Atari ST is a fantastic machine, isn't it? Wall of silence.
Who are you talking to?
Either of you. Say something nice about the ST.
It looks
it beat
very
the Amiga
similar
to
to an
market.
Amiga.
Yeah. Thank you for sponsoring us. Pixel Addict can be found at addict.media website. You can subscribe, you can get it delivered to you, hold it in your hand. The best way to read a magazine is to hold it in your hand, or you can also get the PDF. You can subscribe. It's shipping now.
Excellent news from Italy up next. The police have solved all the serious crimes and all the mafia are behind bars, and they've moved on to less important cases like YouTubers playing games. This story was shared with us by both Radar of Awesome and 42 Nobody 42 and massively upvoted, so we kind of had to cover it. But I am going to tread very carefully here and preface this with we're not experts and this is just opinion and according to what we've read and seen online, etc., etc. And I'll also say that this isn't me saying naughty, naughty pirates, because I'm sure we've all at some point downloaded a ROM or two for personal use, but that's not the issue here, it would seem. So our ass is covered. What's he in trouble for? And when I say in trouble, I mean, according to him, he's been raided by the Italian version of the FBI with officers at his house, his offices, and his parents' house. And consoles have been seized, thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening, scary stuff. The YouTuber in trouble is Once Were Nerd, and he's allegedly in trouble for reviewing those kinds of consoles that play anything retro and come bundled with preloaded SD cards full of games. And again, it's not clear and not something we're experts on because this is very specific to Italian law as well, it would seem. And I'm not sure if it's about the devices, or him reviewing them or him importing them. That's not clear either. So all I'm saying is that's all I'm saying about that story, sorry. And I'll leave the experts in Italian law to do their thing because I don't know. But in my opinion, the actual story here is the wider topic of these retro devices that we all see advertised on social media that somehow come preloaded with thousands of games. What I want to discuss, and I know I'm going to make some enemies here, but it's the topic of copyright on old games. Because I'm sorry, it exists. So let's think about the consoles that do it right. My Atari Flashback 9 springs to mind. It came with 101 games preloaded, and AGIMA had legal rights to do so. They'd have had to have either paid for those rights or at least have some kind of legal agreement. That's a thing. It also has an SD card slot and instructions on how to access that. It doesn't at any stage in the instructions say so that you can download your own games, but obviously, they've covered their backs by just making it available and letting you work it out yourself. The C64 Mini and Maxi and the A500 Mini, same thing. Licensed games out of the box, but leaving it to you, the user, to choose the path of good or evil in what you choose to load thereafter. These companies pay good money to include the games they include. It's not free, or at the very least, they put in the hard yards to obtain legal permission. And if it's not granted, or if there's no legal rights holder available to grant permission, those games are not included. They can't be included. So some of these cheap, questionable emulation boxes that come with everything under the sun preloaded may not only be illegal, but they could be making it harder for those that are trying to do this stuff above board. Now, it's fine to disagree with the law. I don't like some of the speed limits in my area, but me disagreeing doesn't change the law. Keep in mind, of course, that some of these devices, and I've not researched the ones in question from this Italian case, because I don't know about those, but some of them seem to be created in countries with copyright law or lack thereof that differ from our own. So they may not be illegal to create or sell in the host country, but once that device enters another country, copyright law may then apply. At least that's how I understand it. I could be wrong. Open to correction. Covering my ass again? Yes, I am. So, guys, before the lynch mob comes to get me with their pitchforks of opinion, do I have a valid point?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, saying, the law is the law. I mean, right, that's what it all boils down to. Looking at the story, it feels to me like somebody is trying to send a message to larger groups of someones, whether that's national Italian authorities, global IP holders, some other game afoot. I can't really tell, but hey, it's working. Here's This Week in Retro amplifying that message. We have seen cases of misdirected prosecutorial effort, like from 1990 when the U.S. Secret Service raided Steve Jackson games over cyberpunk game materials, which, whether you believe the Secret Service was deluded into thinking those materials represented real cybercrime cookbooks, or if you say, well, they knew that that was a game, but they wanted to send a warning shot to the people that they couldn't find so easily who really were putting out cybercrime guides. Either way, kind of terrible. I definitely don't like the idea that just reviewing something that contains somebody else's IP or trade secret would open you up to prosecution, if that is in fact all this is. Maybe there's something deeper here, but we will probably have to wait for more to come out, either from what was it? I'm sorry. What's our gentleman's name here? Once We're Nerd. Either for him to release something or for this story to be a little more deeply reported.
Yeah, I was quite interested to follow this story to see what the truth of it is after the dust settles, but I'm quite annoyed with how little coverage there actually is that scratches beneath the surface. My initial thought were, hang on, is he being done here because he's taken on a sponsorship? He's trying to promote these things, and the little I was able to find said that that's not the case. Said he always kept it at arm's length. So I guess we'll find out, because if you are taking a sponsorship from these people who are selling these things and you put sponsor links out and so on, you are, and they're breaking the law, then you also would be breaking the law there, I think. In my opinion, though, on ROMs, is that they shouldn't be copyright. They're so old, they shouldn't be copyright. It should have expired a long time ago, but that doesn't really matter because the law is what it is. And they shouldn't be selling devices on the strength of the ROMs that they include. And I think that's the line for me. If you're selling something that can do emulation, like the C64 Ultimate or the Spectrum Next, that's fine. Just don't include the pirated stuff and sell it on the strength of it includes 10,000 games or whatever. That's where I think the line is with me. And Chris did raise a good point. There are some projects out there like the Spectrum Next, the Commodore 64U, the Multisystem 2, Tachyon and stuff, all these different types of things. These are great projects. They are vital for the retro community to have nicer things. And it is unfair if they're having to compete with people who are undercutting them by selling stuff they don't own. So I think that's where I draw the line, which I think is what Chris was trying to say as well. So if you are selling a handheld device or even any kind of retro thing, don't include anything that you're not supposed to, and certainly don't sell it on the strength of that. We've covered Nintendo in the past, and I know that the internet is generally against Nintendo, and for good reason. But when we did cover some of the Switch emulation stuff, I'm reminded that some of it was turning a serious 6- and 7-digit profit by selling pirated stuff and the tools to pirate it. So at the end, I wasn't bothered at all when those places were taken down, because really, I mean, that was piracy for profit, and I think that's beyond the line that's defendable by anyone. So, yeah, I'm going to watch this with interest and find out what the truth of it is, and I would ask people not to jump to any conclusions one way or the other about it. We do know that the modern games industry as a whole, and I think this is what Jason touched on, doesn't like emulation, generally speaking. They don't seem to want, I mean, the stop killing games thing, they don't seem to want to do preservation efforts unless they're doing it for publicity and marketing as a kind of a new thing to do. But generally speaking, they don't seem to encourage, they seem to go against it. So maybe they're putting pressure on the Italian government to do this. I don't know. It's all speculation.
Yeah, it is. The only topic on the actual YouTuber, so once we're nerd, it's only his video I've watched on the topic. I haven't seen anybody else's commentary. Did that on purpose. And it's sort of not clear as to where it's coming from because, as he clearly says in his video, this is stage 1 of the investigation. So they've swept in, confiscated some stuff, and this is the beginning of the authorities' investigation. It could actually be an import issue rather than a review issue. Yeah. But he did also say that he's never taken payment, so it's not sponsorship, but some of these consoles have been sent to him to review. So that could be seen one way or the other. Jason?
Yeah, I wanted to throw in from this discussion about the, should these old games be under copyright or how are they under copyright? Like, I know anecdotally that, like, there are collections out there like the Ironstone Partners collection, and they would keep showing up. There were the old Epix games that would show up on every Commodore 64 project. And, like, I haven't seen the documents, but it's clear that they were able to establish a clear line of ownership dating from the games that were developed and sold by Epix to the present. So people putting out those devices in the 21st century could say, we have it on ink here. We can see we have the rights to do this. Anecdotally, I know that there were game creators out there that would have been happy enough to make some sort of arrangement, but it just wasn't clear who owned what, who had the rights to publish, who had the rights to this code. Often the whoever was doing the port, they might have different rights in there. And Jordan Mechner, as he documented in his Prince of Persia diaries, basically he made so much of his money because he did very carefully control the copyright and the publishing rights of that game. So anytime you wanted to do a Prince of Persia port, he got paid.
I think there has been talk in the past, and I don't know how much truth there isn't in this, that some of the copyrights that are claimed on games are almost dishonestly done. They're almost kind of a bluff. We claim the copyright in this, and you'll need to go to court to prove otherwise, and we know you're not going to. So that there's rumors and there's speculation that not everything that is claimed to be owned is owned. So again, I've come up with this before. I'm not bothered about the old copyright owners getting money from these things, from GOG and all the rest of it. I don't really care. I just want retro to exist in an easy way that doesn't involve legal action.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that. I wonder if those fraudulent claims are those like those copyright agency kind of deals. I know that happens with YouTube music claims, where it's an agency that makes the strike claim, and then they are basically trying to recoup the losses on behalf of the rightful copyright owner, and of course they'll get their cream if that's successful. So maybe it's something similar to that. I don't know.
I know that there's been talk of saying, well, if it ever goes to court, we could prove you don't own it, but who knows what the truth in that is, because it hasn't been to court.
No, that's right. Anyway, I wanted to cover this not just because it was upvoted, but also because I've got good friends on YouTube who review these kind of products. And they need to have fair warning. Some of these devices may not be legit, and they may well put themselves in the firing line by importing them and reviewing them, especially if that is seen as promoting them. So obviously, it's down to you to check the law in your country with eyes wide open. Don't look for something that justifies your point of view. Look with your eyes wide open and try and understand the copyright law. As for the games themselves, well, games are mostly covered under normal copyright law as artistic works. So for people like Dave who think games should be free just because they're old, he's right, and they will be free 70 years after the death of the last surviving author, because that's the law in most places for creative works.
I'd like to welcome on 4 new patrons. So thank you very much for signing up, to Martin, to Stefan, to Manute, and to Andy. Thank you for joining the ranks of the twirlers. I mentioned the Pico CPC a couple of weeks ago, and I've now got an image of what the final board looks like, complete with its little crocodile on the PCB. This is an all-in-one expansion for the CPC, doing everything you would ever want to do on it. It's fantastic. I can't wait to officially releases.
Outrun for the Amiga is out, thanks to the hard work of YouTuber Reassembler. You need to convert the original arcade ROMs to use it. Minimum spec is an Amiga 1200 with a 50 megahertz 030. Yawning Angel has played it on this minimum spec, and it looks very playable and enjoyable. But I've got some mates in Porg, and they're saying, no, it's too slow, and you need an 060. So I don't know. Give it a try. You may get on fine with it. I think it looked fine to me on the 030. I'm going to give it a try. Haven't got around to it, but I just think it's an amazing feat. But I still want to see the A500 port that it deserved.
And speaking of the Patreon, those of you who are subscribed, we will have another edition of our Q&A coming up in just a few days. Duncan has waved his editing wand on the last two segments and added a couple of Easter eggs of his own. So thank you so much. We've answered all the questions you had for the three of us, and are looking forward to doing it again sometime in the future.
It was good fun. We covered ChatGPT and myself getting embarrassed by video chess on the Atari 2600. To update on that, Copilot also got trounced by the humble Atari, and Gemini decided that the only winning move was not to play. So it seems Gemini actually does have some intelligence after all. Thank you, G7VFY, for those updates.
On to news and briefs, and a couple of image-related submissions. Lord Borak with an image of people holding their gamepads in a weird manner, with a question, anyone else have that friend who held the joystick weirdly? And Dragon Mallard, or Dragion Mallard, I don't know, you tell me, correct me, with a question, all this talk of the C64 Ultimate, and a picture of the fantastic early noughties C64 direct-to-TV, which is a C64 built into effectively a competition pro-style joystick.
And Pajako links us to a PC Gamer article about a DIY mad scientist from Poland building his own CPU out of dozens of ancient memory chips. The result is the EEPROM Mint CPU, a proof-of-concept 8-bit CPU. Thanks, Pajako.
Is he a DIY mad scientist, or is he a DIY mad scientist?
I thought DIY mad scientist, but yeah, he could DIY his own madness. Yeah, he could be a perfectly normal scientist who just does his own madness on time.
And news that Dr. Raymond Diggybird has passed at the age of 101, one of the last figures in the early development of the UK computer industry. Thanks, G7VFY, for letting us know.
Crafty Log links us to The Power of Vintage, a really good Atari ST channel. In this video, he covers 4 modern Atari ST and Falcon replacements, and I didn't know anything about the Wiztronics Falcon one until I watched this. So this is potentially a way to own a Falcon because they are incredibly expensive machines.
And if you haven't had enough of spending your money on new 8-bit machines this year, your credit card can take a very short rest because Retro Games Limited has put out a teaser trailer linked to us by Chromatic Ore for their 2026 lineup with the 32-bit A1200, which they say is going to be their full-size release in 2026. They also tease an unnamed full-size working keyboard model, a special edition full-size controller bundle, and a special edition full-size working keyboard release. Mentioned a couple things coming up in 2025 as well. Special edition mini console, limited edition merchandise, special edition bundle, a new accessory, and another brand new mini console in partnership with unnamed third parties. And more to come after that, perhaps.
I hope one of those is a Spectrum Mini, but it's the Maxi one with a keyboard, so that Chris can have to find an excuse not to buy that.
Hey, what is a mini Maxi mini what?
Well, they're called minis, but they sometimes have a keyboard. So a full-size mini.
But they got the 48K, which is full-size. Anyway, yeah. I was thinking the full-size keyboard, surely that's got to be an Amiga keyboard. Surely.
But that seems in addition to the A1200. And
maybe it's a stopgap, though.
And a special edition.
Plug into the back of your A500 Mini. So you got a full-size working keyboard. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just guessing. No idea. Finally, this week, the internet was in uproar because BBC Breakfast had some props laid out and they placed an NES cartridge on a SNES. Yeah, shame on you, BBC.
Yeah, I mean, they're just laying out props. What was the harm in it? There's loads and loads more in the subreddit. If you want to have a look at what's there, submit something, just kill some time, have a browse through the many submissions there. Thank you very much to the people who do submit there. It's what the podcast has come from.
So this weekend, when I saw what my favorite sci-fi trading company downloadable character G7VFY posted to our subreddit, I had a classic, "Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time" reaction. The post is a long article about the canceled prototype computer, an enhanced Apple IIGS machine codenamed Mark Twain. When I asked the tour team, nobody could remember the last time there had been an Apple II story. So let's talk about the Mark Twain and some of his peers, which I do remember vaguely hearing about. This article is from 1996. That might be when I first read about the Mark Twain, and I haven't really thought about it since. By the way, being far too aware of the way a Mark Twain impersonator helped ruin a Star Trek The Next Generation season finale and subsequent season premiere, I will skip the attempt to impersonate Samuel Clemens and just talk about this computer. To understand the Mark Twain prototype, though, we should first understand the Apple IIGS, which really did get sold in fairly decent numbers over a period of several years. It first shipped in 1986, the 2GS adding substantially improved capabilities in graphics, the G, and sound, the S, including 16-color 320 by 200, 4-color 640 by 200 resolution from a 12-bit palette, a 32-channel Ensoniq wavetable sound chip. From a sheer technological standpoint, it's amazing to look at a 2GS from 1986 side by side with a 1977 Apple II. Those initial releases had just a few kilobytes of RAM, very minimal keyboard, little else going for it, and to look at the color, the sound, the vastly superior external keyboard on an Apple IIGS and realize there's still kind of the same computer at the core. The CPU in the 2GS was given a bump from the 65C02 found in earlier models and the 65C816, which would later hit its stride and gain prominence as the core of the Super Nintendo. And although the 816 has a 16-bit architecture internally, it has a mode where it natively operates just like a 65C02, which, oh hey, was what was being used in the Apple IIe, Apple IIc at the time. It was not setting any land speed records. It shipped at 2.8 megahertz, but that's still considerably faster with considerably more RAM on board and more addressable ROM space than the earlier machines, which again were part of the almost 10-year-old Apple II line at the time of the 2GS's release. And in addition to the vast majority of your Apple II back catalog, which ran just fine on the 2GS, you did get some new titles that were associated with 16-bit machines, like Dungeon Master.
Yay!
In short, on paper, the 2GS looked more like early Amiga and Atari ST machines than Apple's Macintosh because, remember, that architecture, the Mac architecture, was still all teeny tiny screens, all black and white, all the time at that point. But the 2GS still felt like an Apple II when you turned it on. If you had spent, 3, 5, 9 years in the Apple II ecosystem, it was still the same kind of experience, although it now had color text and background, which I hasten to remind people was impossible to do on any previous Apple II model. Things that like the Commodore 64 made you take for granted, you could not do on an Apple until the 2GS. By the time you get to 1988, the 2GS has a GUI interface called GSOS, which was very reminiscent of the Mac system software at the time, but, actually in color. The article provided by G7VFY was written by Apple expert and enthusiast named Joe Cohn, and it documents how he came into possession of this new prototype variant of the 2GS, codenamed Mark Twain. The 2GS faithful out there had kind of long latched onto this machine as, this is the one that could have saved us, or these other prototypes that could have saved the Apple II line as a way to keep the Apple II platform relevant and vibrant. Apple did end up formally ending all of their Apple II hardware sales at the end of 1992. They actually continued software support for a while after. They did a teardown of this Mark Twain prototype that they got hold of, likely built in 1991, and revealed that the CPU was still the same 2.8 megahertz 816, but it had 2 megabytes of RAM on board, shades of the Amiga 1200. It had two 30-pin SIM sockets, which you could find straight out of a Macintosh of the era that would take another 2 megs of RAM. Audio quality, it was still the same chip, but apparently it was the overall quality was improved through better electrical isolation. There was a 3.5-inch floppy drive integrated into the case, along with a SCSI controller and a 40 meg SCSI hard drive. Now, by the time they're doing this Mark Twain prototype, Apple's still shipping kind of affordable Macs, and they're shipping Macs that have color, although it would still be a while before they shipped what I would call affordable Macs with color. So this incremental revision of the 2GS was quietly shelved in 1991, and again, the hardware line spluttered out a year later, still marking a more than 15-year run on the same core premise, the Apple II, with lots and lots of incremental improvements. So I want to throw it to you guys. What do you think about this tension as really seen best in the Apple IIGS between, can we just keep advancing that 8-bit experience with incrementally better hardware versus picking up and just dropping yourself into a whole new platform, which, well, you'll get a step up in capabilities, but you're often going to be in a completely alien user interface?
It is the holy grail, I think. And so many companies failed because they couldn't manage it. And it's easy with hindsight to say that if you were going back to the 8-bit times, you should develop your 8-bit micro with expansion possibilities. You should make sure that you expose the bus to pen headers or an edge connector so that you can fully expand it later. And then you would be able to release your micro and then 2 or 3 years later release an expansion at the same time as the upgraded one, and have people been able to fully expand their existing one to the capabilities of the new one, and then keep that cycle going. Lots of companies tried it. Commodore, Atari, Spectrum, Amstrad. They tried and didn't succeed. Even Apple tried it with the 2GS, and I don't think the Apple 2GS would go down as a success in terms of history. Certainly not as successful as the Macintosh. And I just don't think it was that big a success because they didn't manage to pull it off. And I don't quite know why. But if the companies had managed to pull it off, then I think this would have been the holy grail, and it would have enabled them to survive along with the IBM PC when the IBM PC compatible won out, because I don't think IBM really intended it to be the case other than deciding to use only off-the-shelf parts. But your IBM PC could famously be the ship of Theseus or Trigger's broom if you're from the UK, and you could replace each part of it or replace the entire thing, and it would still be the same thing as this Apple IIGS and Mark Twain were.
Chris, any thoughts on that poll?
In terms of expanding machine, all those incremental expansions, I never really thought about that in the 8-bit era, but that's probably because I was a kid, right? And you had the machine that you had for as long as you had it, and you're just playing games with your mates. That's all you use the machine for. It's not like we were trying to keep these things running to run the latest business software. And then the jump was to the next big era of computing. So I didn't really see the need for the incremental upgrades, but they kind of happened without me noticing. I mean, when I think 8-bit, I think Spectrum, but I lusted after the Spectrum 48K, but by the time I got a Spectrum, well, my mates had the Plus 2, so it had more RAM, you had the 128K, you had the better sound chip, and then the one I eventually got was the Plus 3 with the built-in disk drive. So even though I wasn't aware of it, those incremental changes were keeping those lines up and running for the punters to keep buying. So yeah, it happened.
Yeah, and platforms like the Apple II and the TI-99 were more fixated on that kind of expansion capability that Dave alluded to. Despite those reservations, the Apple IIGS, in my mind, is certainly the most successful extrapolation of one of those pioneering 8-bit platforms into a souped-up final form, and this Mark Twain prototype, just an iteration that never really materialized. But just about every 8-bit platform had its, could have been or never quite was upgrade path, and thought we'd use the space this week to mention a few of those as well. So there is that abruptly canceled Texas Instruments 99 4A line, which very nearly had a follow-up, the TI-99/8. That machine was spec'd and was prototyped to have more than triple the CPU clock speed of the 4. I was going to ship with 64K RAM on board, expandable to a full 15 megabytes. That would have been awfully expensive in 1984. And to have integrated their speech synthesis, along with having both BASIC and Pascal in ROM. To talk about Commodore, if we haven't done that enough today, Commodore, of course, shipped the Commodore 128, about which a lot of things can be said, and it cannot be denied that many, many Commodore 128s were sold, but Unless you cared about using Commodore's hamstrung implementation of CP/M, it was not immediately obvious to most people what made the C128 better than the 64. Yes, its BASIC was a lot more powerful. Yes, there were some things you could do with the dedicated 80-column text display, but it ultimately didn't do a lot to change the trajectory of how Commodore 8-bit software was designed and sold. There are 128 specific titles, but not as many as would correlate with just how many of those machines were sold. So to me, and I'm talking as a Commodore guy, the 128 does not feel like nearly as much of an improvement as the Apple IIGS versus the two, earlier two in the twos did. And then, of course, the Commodore 64 DX, which also became known as the 65, which is a bit of a different story. Much like the Apple IIGS, the 64 DX had a new graphics chip, the VIC-3, which had some graphics modes which rivaled the Amigas. It had 2 SID chips on board, which I think would have provided plenty adequate sound. It had solid RAM expansion options, integrated 3.5-inch floppy, and other expansion capabilities. But by the time the prototypes were being produced in earnest in 1991, I think it really should have been quite clear that the future was not a computer that was going to boot to a cheerful BASIC prompt.
Mark Twain said, "The secret to getting ahead is getting started." And they didn't get started in time.
Atari's 8-bit line is interesting because their kind of great hope machine was from earlier than what is recognized as the formal end of the line. The thing that most Apple or Atari fans seem to hold up as this could have changed everything, that dates before Jack Tramiel took over the company from Warner. Prototypes for the Atari 1400 XL and 1450 XLD still exist. They're out there. They were souped-up versions of the basic Atari 800 design, but with integrated 300 baud modem, dedicated bank switching chip for access to more memory, which I believe finds its way into the later iterations, integrated hardware speech synth. Once Tramiel gets into the picture, you can find evidence of Atari trying to extend the life of its 8-bit hardware again with something that was spec'd out as the Atari Super XE game system concept. This apparently would have added 4-color 640 by 192 modes, along with some other improvements. I'll throw it back to you guys. I think we've covered some of this already, but for the past couple of decades, I've frankly been pretty convinced that the ascendance and sustained dominance of the Intel Microsoft hegemony was kind of an inevitable baked-in conclusion for a lot of reasons we can discuss and debate over the weeks and months to come. Do you guys see it differently? Do you think there was a viable, kind of what I'll call non-hopium or rooted in the bargaining stage of grief path to any of those 8-bit pioneers to keep that debut platform relevant into, to pick a milestone, 1995, kind of that dawn of the public internet era as we see it?
No, there definitely wasn't. I mean, Amiga fans rattle on about if only Commodore had done this differently in 1992 or 1993, we'd still be using Amigas today. And obviously, it's nonsense. The only way was PC, and that was obvious by 1995, I think. I think once you see Windows 95 and what it can do, clearly an 8-bit machine can't do that. However, the Commodore 64 is a really special machine because of the things that you can do with a Commodore 64 that you don't think you should be able to do with a Commodore 64. Almost anything that DOS can do, the Commodore, apart from games, the Commodore 64 can do. It can't do it as well or as fast or as with as much detail on the screen, but you could get by in a Commodore 64 for a long time. And then into the 90s, the same with the Amiga. You could get by with an Amiga. You could get an Amiga onto the internet. You could publish a disc-based magazine. You could do lots of things with the Amiga, but it obviously just wasn't a proper mainstream effort like the PC was. I just don't think there was any way away from the Intel and Microsoft hegemony, as you say. I think it was inevitable. Certainly by 1995, it was absolutely writing was on the wall for it.
Yeah, I'll agree that you certainly couldn't drag. I don't think you could drag 8-bit machines into as far as 1995 and going on to internet and stuff. I don't think that's viable at all. And I don't know why you'd want to, because the jump to 16-bit was so much more powerful and so much better. Where I disagree with Dave slightly is, I mean, it was bad management that killed Commodore and Atari, nothing else. We still have Apple, so there wasn't a clear winner. There still isn't. You've still got Apple and you've still got PC. If we're going to write alternate history, we could say the PC never moved beyond the 286 and wasn't upgradable. Therefore, they'd have fallen by the wayside and died, and we'd be discussing if PCs could have made it to 2025, and Dave would be sitting there saying, no, that's silly. It was clear that the Amiga was going to be the winner because it's an alternate timeline, right? So, but yeah, definitely not dragging 8-bits even into the mid 90s. No, not viable at all.
I'm going to disagree on the Commodore and Atari versus Apple front, because I think that one of the things that, and it was close, it was real close to Apple dying, but I think the thing that helped save them was that they were pretty much the only other company out there that had a reputation and an established brand of, you should give us a lot of money, we have good technology.
Yes,
Commodore
that's
and
what
Atari
Apple sold it on. Yeah,
yeah, but frankly, that's what helps you survive. Commodore and Atari kind of had the reputation of, give us a little bit of money and we'll give you something good, and that's difficult to build an R&D war chest with.
If you're in the world of business and you're doing things for money, you're a firm of solicitors, you're a graphic design company, anywhere, you cannot afford to buy a knockdown Jackintosh Atari ST and say, this'll do just fine, we'll save a few £100 over the course of a few years. I mean, that's absolutely nothing compared to the cost. It just didn't pay to go away from Apple if Apple was what you needed for it. So fine, if you're a caravan site and need something to do your accounts on, buy an Atari ST, it's fine for that. Buy a PCW, it's fine for that. But if you were a proper business company doing things, the extra cost of buying Apple or IBM was nearly always worth it.
Yeah,
let's not forget that, of course, Amiga, obviously Atari ST had a big, strong foothold in the music industry, and Amiga had a massive stronghold in the creative industries as well. So that's why I always think about Amiga versus Apple as being, and you're right, the business practice was completely different, which is why there was a success. But in terms of the technology, what I strongly believe is Commodore and Atari remained relevant by innovating, and they died when that stopped happening. They weren't innovating. They were market leaders at one point, and then they stopped being market leaders. So
we will revisit this topic later, I'm sure. But alas, none of those concepts, be it the Mark Twain, the Commodore 65, or anything else, did in fact come in and save the day for the beloved 8-bit platform they were meant to enhance and extend.
Hang on. There's been 2 new 8-bits this week, Jason.
Yeah, a little bit of an interregnum between releases, I would say.
Can they go on the internet?
Yeah, I believe they both do have integrated networking. So I take it all back. As long as you're willing to have your investment go to zero and wait 30 years, you're golden. But yeah, as much as people do tend to resist change, it does seem that the market movement was that when it came to looking at those classic computers of the 70s and 80s, most people really were in fact ready to move on, even if the new user interface paradigm they were going towards was annoying in a different way.
On to the question of the week. And last week we asked you, how has technology affected the job that you wanted as a kid? And the top answer, now we're out of contest mode, is from Dot Matrix Head, and it says, AI swamped the graphic design market, so the overall quality going down and employers expecting the work of 4 people for the price of half a worker. Trades and working in McDonald's looking more profitable. At least that's what Reddit tells me. That's a very miserable take on it.
Yeah, because you're not going to get a job at McDonald's because they'll be taken over by AI waiters. So can't even get a job there. Sorry, mate. Burgers. Yeah.
Northway No says, I wanted to grow up and make coin-op games. That quickly went up in smoke as home tech relentlessly marched on. The debate is still on the Growing Up Part 2.
Bajako6502 says, I really wanted to get into the film business, working in special effects. Back then, even finding out how or where to apply was next to impossible, let alone making a movie and getting it out to people. These days, anyone can make a movie, edit it and distribute it from their phones. And now it's even possible to have AI make most of the footage from out of thin air. As a side note, a friend of my wife works in special effects industry, and they said there is a bit of a move back to practical effects. So there's hope the robot overlords won't take everything away. All hail the singularity.
Yeah, practical effects are great.
Yeah, they're much better.
So our question of the week for this week is, just in theme with the new SU3 Kickstarter, what game are you or would you launch first on your SU3 Spectrum next? What game would you launch first? Answer that any way you like. If you want to answer it, where should you go to? Jason.
You're going to go to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Look for that community question of the week.
Thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next week, Twirlers.
Bye.
I'm waving.
Bye.
Chris is waving.
We're all waving.
Jason's
Jason's
waving.
waving.
Twirlers are all waving to the TV as well. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.